and welcome. And in this video, we're going to be solving systems using matrix equations, okay? So we're going to be using the idea of multiplying matrices together to solve a system, and we're going to be using our calculators to do it. So make sure you have your calculators out. I'll be showing you guys how we can do that, okay? Now, before we jump into solving systems using matrix equations, I want to quickly recap or briefly talk about a real simple problem. Say something like 2x is equal to 6, right? Well, in algebra, you were taught to solve this by dividing each side by 2, right? That would make sense, and it does make sense because what we're doing is we're using its inverse operation, right? 2 is multiplying x, so I would use division to solve for x, which would get me x is equal to 3, right? Now, I want to quickly talk a little bit about what we can also be using here, what's also kind of happening here, okay? Dividing by 2 is the exact same as multiplying by 1/2, right? That's the exact same thing, okay? Because once again, these would cancel out and leave me with just x, okay? And I would multiply each side by 1/2. Now, what we're actually doing here is using something called the multiplicative inverse, okay? And whenever you multiply by the multiplicative inverse, basically everything cancels out and leaves you with just 1, okay? And that's how you would get x is equal to 3 as well, okay? So for example, the number 3's multiplicative inverse would be 1/3, because if I multiply 3 by 1/3, I get 1. 4's would be 1/4, right? 3/2 would be 2/3, okay? So that is the multiplicative inverse. And the reason I talk about that is because we don't necessarily divide matrices. We instead multiply by the multiplicative inverse of a matrix, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about that in an example. So let's take a look at an example. Okay, so we have a system here. We have 2x plus 3y is equal to 7 and x minus 4y is equal to -2, okay? And we're going to solve this system using a matrix equation and the multiplicative inverse of a matrix, okay? But the first thing that we got to do is we actually have to set up a matrix equation, okay? Make sure you have your calculators ready because we will be using those, all right? Now, when we solve a system using matrix equations, I'm always going to set it up as such. Matrix A times matrix X is equal to matrix B, okay? What do all those matrices mean? Well, A is going to be what I call the coefficient matrix, okay? And X is going to be what I call the variable matrix. And B is going to be what I call the constant matrix, okay? And now we set up each of these matrices. All right. Now, A is a coefficient matrix. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that your system is set up just like this, where we have something x plus something y is equal to something for both equations. We want the x's to line up and the y's to line up, and our constants, what we're equal to line up, okay? So now our coefficient matrix is going to be a square matrix. And by square matrix, I just mean a matrix that has the same number of rows as columns, okay? That's very important. So I'm going to set this up. I'm going to set up this matrix. So matrix A, I probably should be using the same colors. So matrix A is going to be all the coefficients. So our coefficients in the first equation, well, the coefficient on x was 2. That was a terrible 2. The coefficient on x was 2. The coefficient on y was 3, okay? And then I look at my second equation. The coefficient on x was 1, and the coefficient on y was -4. Notice how they line up. X over x, y over y. We're good, okay? And this is going to be times our variable matrix, which is not going to be a square one. It's just going to represent what our variables are. Okay, so we have variables x and y. And you could use this for a 3-variable system. Just know that you would have another row and column in your square matrix, and that you would have just another variable in your variable matrix. Okay, and the same for your constant matrix. Because now we're going to make this equal to our constant matrix. Okay, and this is where we just use the constants. The first equation, 2x plus 3y, was equal to 7, and we had 1x minus 4y was equal to -2. And there would be our matrix equation, okay? Now, just like what we did before when I was like 2x is equal to 6, we multiplied by the multiplicative inverse, okay? So what we're going to actually do, let me go ahead and rewrite this. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply each side by the multiplicative inverse of A. Okay, because what we're trying to solve for is our variable matrix, okay? Because that's where our variables are, and that's what we want to solve for eventually, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each side by A's multiplicative inverse, okay? And order matters, so it's going to be coming first. And what happens when we multiply two numbers by the multiplicative inverse of one another, they cancel out and leave us with 1. So what's going to end up happening here, why did I say it like that? What's going to end up happening here is that those matrices are going to cancel out and leave us with just 1. So what we're left with now is X is equal to the multiplicative inverse of A times B. Okay, and this is when we can actually use our calculator. So give me 1 second, let me get my calculator out and ready. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is notice I just went ahead and rewrote this so it matches up. We have our variable matrix equal to the inverse of our coefficient matrix times the constant matrix. Now what I can use is I can use my calculator to input all this information, okay? So to get to matrix, to get to where you can input a matrix, you're going to click on second. And if you notice, you have matrix right here in blue. So I'm going to click on that. And now I get to matrices, okay? And what I want to do is I want to edit a matrix. So I'm going to scroll over to edit. And I'm going to edit matrix A. Now matrix A is a coefficient matrix. And it was a 2 by 2. So I'm going to click 2, enter 2. And now I can go ahead and enter in my information, okay? So you're going to want to click on the actual number. So for example, 2, and then click enter, all right? So you're going to want to do these for all of them. And once you do that, just make sure you entered everything incorrectly. I actually made a mistake and that would have screwed everything up. But make sure you enter everything incorrectly. And once you do that, you're going to go ahead and go back to that, all right? Now, some calculators kind of tweak out for some reason. There's like something weird with the programming in some of these calculators. So I actually quit right away. So I click second and mode to quit. And then I just go back into that menu, okay? And now I'm going to go ahead and edit matrix B, okay? Which is going to be my constant matrix. Matrix B was a 2 by 1. And now I'm just going to go ahead and enter in those values, which are 7 and -2. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and exit out here. And now what we can do, now in some cases, you're actually going to want to know what that inverse matrix is. So to do that, I'm going to go back to that matrix menu, click on A. Now we're not going to go to edit. We're literally just going to go to whatever matrix we want. I want matrix A. I'm going to click enter. And if I want the inverse of this matrix, notice that button there that we use, we just don't click on second. That represents the inverse. So now this is going to get me the inverse of matrix A, which is this gobbledygook. Okay, this is just fractions. So if you don't know by now, you can click on math and then enter on frac, and then just it's going to convert it all to fractions for you. Okay, so that means that our inverse matrix is 4 11s, 3 11s, 1 11th, and -2 11s. Okay, so that is the inverse of matrix A. And now what we do is, since we have the inverse of matrix A, is we're just going to go ahead and multiply that by matrix B. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to this menu. I want to click on matrix B. I'm going to click enter, and there is our answer for X. Okay, we have 2, 1. So what that means is that matrix XY, which is our variable matrix, is equal to the matrix 2, 1. And what that means is that X is equal to 2 and Y is equal to 1, okay? And remember, this is a system, so we should always write our answer as an ordered pair, all right? Now, I'm just going to go ahead and enter that in again. Some teachers, and sometimes this is actually me, I actually want you to write out what this matrix is, okay? So you have to kind of follow those steps. But if I don't want that matrix, like if I just want the final answer, I can literally just go boom, boom. I'm clicking on matrix A, inverse of matrix A times matrix B. So I'm going to go back to that menu, matrix B, and it's going to get me that, okay? So that's what I'm going to be doing from now on, but make sure that you know how to actually find the inverse, okay?